Hey readers, I'm Abby.
And I'm Jess.
Thank you so much for reading along with us with our July book club pick. If you need a refresher, we read City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And boy, did we love this book.
We love this book so much. I actually read it on the beach, which is why my dust jacket is missing. But it was so good. I couldn't put it down. If you don't already know, what this book is about is a woman named Vivian Morris who gets kicked out of Vassar College at the age of 19.
Yeah, she has to leave after she attends 0 classes her freshman year.
And she really didn't enjoy it, as you can gather from that. And she's sent to New York City to live with her Aunt Peg, who owns a theater house called the Lily Playhouse in Midtown. And it's 1940, and she is just completely enthralled by the glamour that she encounters when she moves to New York.
She moves right into the second floor of the Playhouse, right over the theater, and she's surrounded by all of these characters. We've got the showgirls that are in the performances every night. We have the actors and actresses, the man that writes all of the scripts. We have, of course, Peg and Olive, who's the very straight and
stern,
narrow business type. She keeps everyone on the straight and narrow. We meet Celia Ray, who is a showgirl of the upper echelon. She's super gorgeous.
You can kind of picture her when she's described. She's got this dark hair, dark brown eyes, pale skin, and just like a voluptuous body.
She looks like Jess.
And Vivian is just immediately attracted to her personality and her vibe. I don't know a better word for that,
Vivian led this sheltered life. She grew up in the suburbs with these 2 parents and an older brother who never did anything wrong.
Yes.
And has really, not seen the world for what it is. And Celia represents, with her magnetic energy, sort of all of these possibilities.
Yes.
And the 2 of them begin to go out on the town together
every
night.
Have some wild, drunken nights with many men. Celia really does, I think, introduce Vivian to the world of sex. And Vivian just fits right in there. She loves it. She's a fast learner. Celia really shows her what life could be like, what nightlife is like in New York City in the 1940s. And I was shocked reading it because I was under the impression that at that time no one was doing those things. I don't know why I believed this. No one was getting drunk. No one was at least women, going out and just having one night stands. And so I really enjoyed reading about that and learning that was a thing. And even though this is fiction, I'm sure it actually did happen.
Yeah, Vivian has quite a sexual awakening, and she's out every night. She's discovering her independence, her agency as a woman. They go to all these different clubs and tumble home drunkenly at night. And it's not all rosy.
No, there were some difficult parts that were almost glazed over to a certain extent, especially with Celia Ray. You learn a little bit about her past and kind of where she came from, and that she experienced some really bad abuse from men in her life. She was homeless for a period of time, and the Lily Playhouse really was her sanctuary. But Vivian learns pretty quickly that men are not always fun, and that some nights can get very dangerous.
Yeah, I was actually, reading it with a 2019 perspective. I was struck by just sort of how footloose and fancy free they were, and really weren't focused on a lot of the consequences, the hangovers, the, men grabbing them, sort of, they always almost got away sort of scot-free.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Almost.
And Vivian talks about how they were kind of like looking for danger around every corner, and that really rang true, because I was just picturing, like, again, even today, like walking down the street late at night, drunk with like one friend, to me seems very dangerous even now. So that, looking back, I don't know, it was very risky.
Yeah. So the meat of this book centers on the Lily Playhouse, and the paint is peeling, and they can barely sort of pay to keep the lights on.
Could you picture the Lily Playhouse in your head?
I definitely could.
Yeah,
these sort of
too.
tired murals on the lobby walls, and it's got such grandeur, but it's covered in grime a little bit.
Yeah.
So they're used to doing these nickel performances for the community. It's all the community can afford to pay. Yeah. It's sort of a trope that they do over and over again. There's a heroine, there's a bad guy, there's a man who falls in love with the heroine and saves the day. But Peg is actually married to this guy named Billy.
Yes.
And Billy lives a separate life, actually, in Hollywood.
Yeah, they've been separated. They're not divorced, but they haven't lived together in a very long time.
Exactly. They live sort of these different lives, and Billy is really a ladies' man in his own right, so he prefers that arrangement, I'm sure. But he waltzes back into town, and together they create this play that's going to be the play, the savior of the Lily Playhouse, and that play is called City of Girls.
When that line appeared in the book, I was like, oh my God, this is the name of the play that they're putting on. It was so cool. And also I know is like Billy is a very wealthy, famous director, so having him come in and like help write the show and like produce it and direct it was like a big deal for Peg, because the Lily Playhouse was struggling a lot, and they kind of needed this break to make it.
Yeah.
And so this was a really like a saving grace for them.
And so they cast this incredible cast of characters, sort of higher prowess than what they're used to, and they all bust their butts and get this performance ready for showtime.
Yes.
And it turns out to be a showstopper. Everyone loves this play. It does so well, and even though they had to raise the ticket prices, people are coming to see it.
It paid off, and I'm telling you, when I was reading this, I could feel just the air around this show. I was in theater for a long time, and when Elizabeth Gilbert was describing just like them preparing for the show and what was going on behind the scenes, writing the music, just the staging of it all, I could picture it. And the thing that touched me the most was like before the opening night. That's always like a big night when everyone's very nervous about how it's going to go, and just the energy in the room. I could feel it, the words of like luck and wisdom coming from Billy and Peg. It was amazing, and it brought me back to those days. So she did a really great job of describing that feeling and honestly creating a show. She created a really awesome show that I would love to see. It sounds so good. So I really love that part of the book.
And so you might be wondering what our girl Vivian is doing this whole time, besides getting drunk with Celia. Vivian turns out to be, from early days, a very talented seamstress.
Yes.
So instead of going to class at Vassar, she had girls lining up outside of her dorm and asking for alterations, and can you make this skirt fit? And so she's very skilled with her sewing machine.
Yes.
And so what does she do at the Lily Playhouse? Everyone has a role. She is the costume mistress and is in charge of outfitting everyone in costumes, although she's working on absolutely zero budget. So she often goes to sort of, you would think of it as like a secondhand store or a vintage store, but basically she's digging through rags
for gold
and
kind of,
finding, oh, here's a great velvet dress from the 1920s that someone donated. Here's some fringe, I can use that. So she's very resourceful with these scraps of fabric that she finds. And she's not alone in sourcing some of these great fabrics.
Yeah, she has a friend named Marjorie who works at this fabric shop that she goes to regularly and develops a really great relationship with her. Marjorie is very eccentric, is how I would describe her. And that bond kind of develops over the course of the novel.
Yeah.
But I really loved Vivian's passion for sewing and for creating costumes and clothing. When she first comes to the Lily Playhouse, she is kind of nervous because she doesn't really know like what her role will be. And as we said, it turns out to be costumes. But she says that she wears only clothes that she makes, and everyone is just blown away by this, and she seems so proud of it, and she worked hard to get there. Her grandmother taught her how to sew, and it's something very special to her. And I love when a character has like such a defining passion for something, and it carries her throughout this entire book and throughout her entire life.
Yeah, I mean, clearly she's not an academic. She is asked to leave Vassar, and she feels like she can never measure up to her brother, who actually decides to go into military service at the start of World War II as the U.S. decides to enter the war. She feels like she can never measure up to his perfection.
What do you think about her brother?
Well, I think it's a complicated relationship. I think that sort of male and female relationships of the time, were very expected, and so he felt that he had to be sort of an upstanding man, strong, exhibit this strength of character first on the sports field, then in the Navy. I think he felt that he had no other choice. And then her role is supposed to be very well defined, which is that she's supposed to, stay sort of pious and find a great guy to marry. And spoiler alert, she doesn't follow the path that has been set out for her since birth. She enjoys being in the Playhouse with all of these characters, and I think she feels some major judgment from her brother.
Yeah, her brother is very hard on her, and when he comes to New York, this is before he joins the Navy, he gets a glimpse of her lifestyle. And I think he is very shocked at what he sees, her drunken nights and her boyfriend, Anthony, who is a lead in the show City of Girls, who is very touchy and publicly so, and her brother sees it, and he is just furious, honestly.
They almost get in a rumble.
Her and Anthony, her boyfriend Anthony and her brother, and things just heat up, and he kind of tells her, like, stop this, as a command, like, not suggesting, he's like, stop it right now. And he almost is like a father figure to her in many ways, like a harsh father figure.
I'm extremely close with my brother, and so I sort of ached for them that they didn't have that kind of close relationship.
Yeah.
Especially, towards the end of the book, she really, I think, mourns the relationship that they could have had.
Yeah.
And if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But they never really achieved that sort of incredible sibling closeness that I think is so wonderful.
Yeah. And her relationship with her parents is also very
tenuous. Yes.
Yeah, her mother is almost not present.
She's like
ever.
An icy equestrian who only cares about her horses and riding, and basically, like, with both of her parents, I think it's like, don't bring shame on the family, and also we don't have the energy to deal with you.
Yeah.
And so they just ship her off to Aunt Peg, who is sort of this quirky aunt. Like, and same, modeling after Vivian and Walter, her brother, her father doesn't even like his sister, Aunt Peg. I mean, they barely talk, ever.
No.
So
that kind of amused me a little bit when Aunt Peg came to the house and he was like, "Oh my God, like what do you want here?" Aunt Peg is like kind of the crazy aunt. I love her though, and I think she was really progressive because, again, spoiler alert, she was with a woman. Olive was her partner, and in the 1940s, I'm sure that was frowned upon, and they even got an apartment together eventually. And I think Aunt Peg was really an important figure in Vivian's life, and
totally.
Allowing her to just be was very important.
And Aunt Peg also, I think, struggles with addiction. We can sort of see.
Yes.
You know, when Billy rolls back into town, he's like this out-of-control partier, and you can see his influence immediately on Peg. And she starts drinking more and, you know, isn't able to wake up and bounce back in the ways that she, you know, she sort of kept it under control when Billy wasn't there. But the second that he comes back, she sort of loses control and really reckons with that, I think, throughout the book, which was another great layer to her personality.
Yes. Yeah, the one part that really touched me was when Peg drank way too much with Billy, and she comes home and Olive is waiting, and she takes Peg in and takes care of her and is like, has tears in her eyes when she says she can't stop, like she can't just know when enough is enough. And that really made me very emotional.
Yeah.
Because Olive is a very, like we said before, stern, very like emotionless character. But when it comes to Peg, especially in that moment, you could tell just how strongly she felt for her.
So the Lily Playhouse puts on City of Girls, and it's a wild success. So wild that it actually gets bought and gets moved to Broadway.
Yes.
And eventually the Playhouse closes.
Yeah.
And we think this might be the end of the story, but there's so much more. Basically, this story is told from the vantage point of Vivian as a very, very old woman, reflecting on the life that she's lived.
And it's like a letter to this woman named Angela, and you don't really know who Angela is. All you know is that Vivian is trying to explain what Angela's father is to her.
Yeah. And so that's, we have no idea who this person is through the whole book, and I'm like, is this going to be Anthony's daughter?
Yes.
Angela.
I was thinking that too.
No.
Yeah.
So they've moved past the Playhouse. The Playhouse is closed. Peg and Olive move out. She ends up befriending Marjorie, this young woman who worked in the rag shop, and the two of them, Marjorie ends up buying a building, and they start a wedding dress atelier.
Yes.
Where they're making wedding dresses, and of course Vivian does all of the sewing, and Marjorie does the designs, and they really create this sort of life together. Not romantically, but there is a huge love between these two women, so much so that that is their life that they create.
I almost thought it was going to turn into a romantic relationship, and was kind of rooting for it, honestly, but it didn't. And I did, in the end, feel very satisfied with their friendship that they developed. They even raised a son together, which was just beautiful. And Vivian felt content. I don't think she felt like she needed to be married to have lived a full life. And she was just happy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So towards the end of the book, we see that Vivian is actually asked to she and Peg used to work on these shows in the Navy Yard during the war. And, we had to boost morale. And so after the Playhouse, they were doing all of these shows about catching Hitler and, supposed to boost the soldiers' morale. And she's actually asked back to do an anniversary show at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And a policeman approaches her there and reveals to Vivian that he actually was in her life at a defining moment earlier.
Yeah.
We won't say what it is.
Should we touch a little on the scandal or not? I don't know.
Okay. If you haven't read it, you're already
in deep, I guess.
So basically, it's going to be a long explanation.
It's a long explanation. Anyway,
you know the scandal. If you've...
Yeah.
And this guy said something to Vivian that really just,
rocked her.
He shamed her. He slut-shamed her.
Yeah, and I think it really speaks to how sometimes strangers can have the biggest impact on you. The littlest thing they could say could mean more than anybody else. So he slut-shamed her, and she carried it with her for her entire life.
Yeah. Feeling she was a bad person.
Yes.
Because she'd been promiscuous and had a boyfriend and, was having sex before she got married, sort of all of these markers of this old school promiscuity.
Yeah.
And Frank somehow is involved in this, and it's too much to go into. You know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he slut-shames her, and she is convinced that she's sort of a bad person. The shame that she carries from that, she can't get over. And so now here's Frank approaching her being like, oh, hey, by the way, I was in that car so many years ago, and I said this terrible thing to you, and I'd like to and she's just like, I'm out of here. Goodbye.
Yep.
And she doesn't even give him a chance to say anything.
No.
But then she ponders it and feels bad and wants to connect with him, and just basically if this guy was going to apologize, maybe I should listen to him.
And he knew her brother.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. I think at this point in her life, she was missing her brother, and
he dies.
He dies. He dies in the war, and wanted to just speak to someone who knew him better than she did.
Yeah.
And
so she gives him a second chance.
Gives him a chance. And what does that lead to?
An amazing friendship and love. Yeah. So basically Frank has PTSD from the war, which is not talked about in the 50s at all, but he has been desperately affected by his time in service and has the shakes. He cannot have anyone touch him. He's just very sensitive to other humans and loud noises, and as a way to deal with this anxiety, he finds himself wanting to walk all over Brooklyn at all hours of the night. And he and Vivian become friends, and they just start pounding the pavement together, walking this neighborhood and then this neighborhood and then this neighborhood and Queens and Manhattan and Staten Island. They're all over.
Yep.
And just talking and walking and talking and walking. And it's not romantic. I mean, Frank is married. He has a wife. He doesn't want to touch her or be touched by her.
Yeah.
So it's not a romantic love, but it is a love, right?
It is a love. I think it's a strong love. I think that, and I would argue this, but people might disagree. I think sometimes that kind of love can be even stronger than your typical romantic love, because your whole relationship is based on something other than your physical connection. Mm-hmm. It's really emotional. And Frank shares things with Vivian that he never shared before. And I think that just creates something very powerful and something that's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Because I think when a man and a woman are very close friends, people always assume that they have to be more than that, but they're really not. And they only get stronger and over time. It's a beautiful, beautiful friendship. And I would argue that it's a very strong love connection.
Yeah, and so this is really like Vivian's outlet. You know, she makes wedding dresses for others during the day, and then she walks with this man at night, and they tell each other everything. And it's so interesting. I love Elizabeth Gilbert for creating this woman, this heroine, that doesn't need to follow the rules.
Yes.
Like, there's no wedding for Vivian at the end. There's no babies for her. There's no prescribed ending that she's been told her whole life that she has to live towards. Like, this is a heroine who creates her own path from the start.
Yeah. And one of the key lines that's right on the back of the book is that you don't have to be a good girl to be a good person. And I think that this whole story really proves that point. I mean, a lot of people expect women still to this day to, you know, follow that path to get married and have kids and just
be polite and quiet and
give up their career for a family. And I loved Vivian. I loved that she was a little bad, and I loved that she didn't just do things to appease people. So she was one of my favorite characters.
And she's also the fact that we have her reflecting back on her own life means that she gets to tell us when she screwed up. So one major character we didn't even touch on in this 20-minute long recap of this book is Edna, who is like a famous Shakespeare actress whose house actually is bombed during the Blitz. She lives in London, and her entire house is gone. And so she decides, like, well, I'm going to stay in New York, I guess. And Billy makes her the center of the show, City of Girls. And she's the sort of actress with gravitas. And you can see Vivian's attention go from, like, oh, Celia, my party girlfriend, to, like, oh, my, Edna. Like, whoa, you are cool, you wear suits and pants, and you are self-possessed and like wise and awesome. And Vivian screws up. She betrays Edna in a way that the two of them cannot get over.
No. And Edna tells her one of the worst things I think you could ever tell someone, basically that she will amount to be nothing, that she is nothing.
Interesting.
Yes.
She's not even interesting.
I think if someone told me that, I would just crumble into tiny little pieces.
Yeah. It's very cutting.
It is very cutting.
Yes. And so, anyway, in Vivian's looking back on, like, here's my whole life, Angela, here's everything I've done that led up to this point, she can reflect on, like, I screwed up with Edna. I didn't really treat her in the way that, you know, maybe she deserved to be treated. So there's some reflection there. It's not just like, and then this happened, and then this. You know, there's some looking back, which is so cool. It teaches us a lot about Vivian and about her own thoughts of her, like, 20-year-old self or 30-year-old. I mean, who among us has not looked back like, ugh, those
and
things
like,
I
oh,
did.
Man. Or validate what you did and be like, well, that was fun and a great time, and I don't regret any of it.
I got a lot of those, yeah.
But I love that it was told from her perspective as an older woman because, like you said, she reflects on everything. There's a certain wisdom that she has now, like, looking back. And I never felt like it wasn't an older woman looking back, which was interesting. I always remembered that she was looking back on her time. But I still somehow got lost in each moment.
Totally. I would get so absorbed in, like, what's the theater going to do? And are they going to learn the choreography? And then it would be like, and Angela, we did. And I'm like, oh my God. Right. This is a letter. This is a long letter. So yeah, she kept, like, tethering us back to that moment.
Yeah. And Angela is Frank's daughter.
Yeah.
So her explaining, you know, what Frank meant to her was a lot.
Yeah, it's a way. I mean, Frank dies, and she sort of doesn't really get to know him to the extent that Vivian did on all those walks. I mean, she was a little girl when her father returned back from the war, and
her father was obviously distant because
totally
of what he experienced.
And he's not sharing these things with his 5-year-old daughter. And so this is a way for Vivian to pass on this incredible knowledge of her dad to this young woman. And that just, like, undid me. I mean, I loved that part.
Yeah.
So do you think, what do you think of all of her friendships with women over the years? I mean, we see her, like, in the dorm, we see her with Celia, then we see her with Edna, and then finally with Marjorie. How do you think her her experience as a friend grows?
I think first of all, her friendship shaped her for sure. I at first thought she was a little obsessive. Not going to lie there. I didn't understand fully her relationship with Celia at first. I was like, why are you letting this woman ruin your room and sleep with you every night? And I thought there was some level of, like, romantic interest there all the time. But there wasn't. I think that over time, she saw past any superficial things that she was interested in, like Celia's looks, and I do like Celia. I love Celia, so I'm not
dissing Celia.
Dissing Celia, but with Marjorie, for instance, that relationship lasts a very long time. Is built on substantial grounds, and they grow with each other. Whereas Celia was, like, I think a temporary person that was meant to be in Vivian's life. And yeah, I don't know. I think that I like this book a lot because a lot of the relationships are, the important ones at least, are with women.
Yeah, I mean, and I think both Peg and Olive and Edna certainly serve, more so than her own mother, as, like, these upper echelon mature women.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, you know, even that generational difference, they react to things you know, so much differently, or expect different things from men. So I thought that generational difference, and Vivian looking up to these women who paved the way, who have created different marriages, different ways of living, different ways of making a living, and they were really her role models, which I loved.
They really were. And even Edna, I mean, this is why it hurt so much when that relationship ended. Edna was really there for her and for Vivian, and was rooting for her. I think she saw great potential in Vivian and encouraged her. And Edna's relationship with her husband was so interesting because she was really the one in charge there. I think
that guy sucks.
He was my least favorite character, maybe of all time. I absolutely hated him. Every time he would speak, I was like, oh God, like, here we go again.
Yeah, he's also an actor, but he can't act.
He can't act. He's so bad at it.
And
he's dumb. Like, he does not understand anything.
Yeah, it's like, Edna's so much better than you, bud. And I wanted Edna to just, like, leave his ass.
Yeah.
But she won't.
She thinks he's a pretty younger man.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
he is.
Get your kicks, but
yeah.
And he's also got money, and, you know, so it was complicated. But I thought that Edna wasn't as mad at her dumb husband for his indiscretions as she was to Vivian.
Yeah.
So she didn't treat them both the same. Maybe because she expected more from Vivian. Like,
that's true.
Her
dumb husband is her dumb husband.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh, but he was the worst.
He was the worst. I really hated him. I don't even remember. What was his name even? Arthur. Ugh.
Get out of here.
Arthur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we could talk about this book
I could really
all
keep
day.
going. It's been a long conversation already, and I'm enjoying it.
And it's rife with spoilers, so hopefully you've watched it.
I mean, you've read it.
Thank you.
It's been a long day.
What was your favorite scene?
Well, the pre-show one was one of my favorites. I would have to also say when they opened the wedding shop.
Yes.
And they started just making that grow. Like, it was a beautiful moment, and it validated Vivian's talent when she felt so broken down from Edna's, like, comment.
Yeah.
And also when Vivian first comes to New York City. I mean,
that
just...
is my favorite. I know.
You could feel the, like, wonder in her eyes as she's just looking around at everything that New York City is and has to offer.
It's like exactly how I felt when I moved to the city 11 years ago. Just like, I can't believe I get to live here. And, I mean, this city has such energy, and it's so palpable in these pages, just like the wonderment of New York City.
There's nowhere else like it.
Exactly. Yeah. And Vivian just, like, she's a city girl. So I think she was sort of waiting for her life to start until she got to New York.
It was a beautiful, beautiful moment.
So we're so excited to hear from you guys. What scenes did you love? What characters did you adore? What characters did you despise?
Hopefully it's Arthur.
Let us know in the comments. I hope you're all interacting with one another about this book. We heard from some of you. You thought it was too sexy. We loved the sex.
Yeah, we love it. Give us more.
So hopefully you were not offended by that, but no, we absolutely love this book. It's such a beauty.
Look at it. Look at that.
So we hope you enjoyed our July pick just as much as we did. Let us know. Let's keep talking about it on Facebook. And thanks for joining our talk.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.